What is up, everybody? Welcome to Football Diehards. Today on Sunday, we are going to talk game by game, as always, talk some strategy, talk some ownership as well. I'm here with Jamie. Jamie, what is up? Are you looking forward to this week 5?
Absolutely. We got a game going on right now. Actually, the Falcons are inside the 5 after another catch by Cordero Patterson. So, excuse me. We'll see if they can punch one in. Kyle Pitts hasn't made much noise yet today. So let's get to the slate, though. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been killing it in tournaments the past few weeks. Cash has not been there, but I'm hoping to continue the momentum in the tournaments, but hopefully, win some cash as well. So we'll talk some strategy, cash, GPP, all that good stuff. And I say we get right into it then. We'll start with the very first game, and we have the Saints going against Washington. So who is sticking out to you on this one here?
Well, before we do that, we just spoke it into existence. Kyle Pitts just scored looks like a 4-yard touchdown pass, 4 catches, 36 yards, and a touchdown. So the Ridley-less Falcons we're seeing the Pitts game that we're, I guess, hoping to see there. So Saints and where was I going here? I got wrapped up in the game and I lost my page. Why don't you start?
So Saints versus Washington. I guess for me, what the guys that stick out the most. So Logan Thomas is on IR. So I think Ricky Seals-Jones at 2,500 does stick out to me in terms of a very, very cheap punt option at tight end. And we talked about it a little bit on Wednesday how, I'm more inclined to punt down at tight end because it's a crazy position, right? Like nothing really sticks out this week. So might as well go down 2,500. Give me Seals-Jones. Give me 4, 5, 6 targets maybe. He had 4 targets last week going against the Saints, who very good run defense, very good defense in general. But if he's going to get 4 or 5 targets, 2,500, I'll be happy with that. So I don't mind Seals-Jones as a punt play. Outside of that, Curtis Samuel is expected to play. He's $3K minimum price at wide receiver. I think he played something like 36% of the snaps last week. I think he had 4 targets, 4 receptions for Curtis Samuel. Again, another guy that's very cheap. So we have Samuel, minimum price $3K. We have Seals-Jones, minimum price $2,500. Do any of those two guys stick out? And then what else sticks out to you on this game?
Yeah, I'm with you on those. As far as tight end, I like to punt as well, and even this week it's even more because we don't have Travis Kelce on the main slate, and George Kittle is injured. So pretty much it's like Darren Waller and then garbage. So with the opportunity cost, you might as well just sift through the garbage and find the cheapest one that's going to get volume. And I'm with you. Ricky Seals-Jones is definitely going to be my cash tight end this week. And also the defense too. The Washington defense has dropped to 2,300, and I like to punt them too. I was already on them as the defense that I was going to use, and now the Saints don't have Terron Armstead, their left tackle, and they don't have their center, Eric McCoy. So I really love their defense as a fantasy play this week, and I think they're going to beat the Saints outright. And then, we should mention Terry McLaurin as well. He's just volume central. He's got 38 targets. The next highest on Washington is Logan Thomas and Adam Humphries are tied with 14 each, even with Marshawn Lattimore on him, who didn't look good against the Giants last week. McLaurin could explode this week with the volume coming his way. So I'm good with him in all formats as well.
Yep, I think McLaurin is fine pretty much on any given week for sure. We see that Thomas is out. That should help McLaurin in terms of the target share. We see that Washington football team is actually the highest projected owned defense, sitting at 10% owned, the next best, the Raiders, and then the Eagles following them. I'm with you on the Washington football team call, 2,300, very cheap, the cheapest they've been all year. Their defense has looked horrible this year, but you mentioned that Saints have some injuries. The Saints offense has not been that great this year anyway, so I think Washington is not a bad punt defense. And in terms of Ricky Seals-Jones, kind of surprised that he's actually projected to be the 3rd highest owned tight end at 8% owned. I thought I was being a little bit sneaky, but no, he's getting some ownership there. Anything else on this game, or do you want to move on?
No, I think we can go on from this game. Washington's got some nice pieces against the Saints defense that has had some questionable stuff going on.
Yeah, for sure. Cheap, nice pieces to look at there in terms of getting some value. So let's move on to the next game. We have the Patriots going against the Texans. Anything sticking out to you on this one?
Yeah, we were talking about this pre-show that for a while Jacoby Myers was coming in at the highest owned wide receiver. He's now the third highest. Um, I was higher on him earlier in the week, I will say. He does have 26 targets over the last 2 weeks, and the Houston defense is one that you can attack. So they're 31st in adjusted sack rate. So Mac Jones should be upright with a clean pocket to throw in for one of the first times all season. So I really like Myers at his price tag. I liked him a lot better before 4 out of 5 of New England's starters on the offensive line were ruled out for this one. So, I mean, it's weird to say, but I think if you're mass multi entering in GPPs, I don't hate going with Houston if there's at the minimum price, if there is potential couple of sacks and a couple of turnovers to be had against like a patchwork offensive line, but I still like Myers a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wasn't, too high on Myers at the beginning of the week, and especially seeing that ownership, I'm probably not going to get there a ton. But it's hard to deny that he's been getting a ton of targets the last couple of weeks. 12 targets in week 4, 14 targets in week 3, and it's a great matchup as well. Yeah, this one's weird, like especially considering the Patriots are missing, most of their offensive linemen. I don't know how much I'll get to it, but Damian Harris, I felt like it would be a solid, bounce back spot. I mean, you can't be any worse, right? -4 yards in week 4 against Tampa Bay, 14 rushing yards in week 3 against New Orleans. But the thing with Tampa Bay and the Saints are two of the best run defenses in the league. I mean, Tampa Bay's run defense is phenomenal. Teams do not run against them. So I feel like, Damian Harris could bounce back here, but, like you said, Patriots are missing a lot of their offensive line, so that doesn't really help there. But I think Harris is somewhat interesting, 5,500, but I just don't know if I'll get there now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was a lot higher on him. I think he's affected more by this this kind of offensive line shift than Myers is. So I have a bit still because I do think this is the time he can get those 20 to 25 carries again. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. What about Houston? I mean, we've talked all season that Brandon Cooks is really the only playable asset on that team. Are you okay with him this week, or are you just kind of going off him with their offense looking like, the worst thing ever?
Well, if there's somebody I would play, it would be Cook. So I just don't see myself getting too much of him or this game, to be honest, much. But yeah, I think Cooks is probably always in play. But yeah, it's hard to get too excited about this Texans offense in general.
Yeah, I mean, will they even score a touchdown? I don't think so.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
But not a ton for that game. I say we move on to the next one. And we have the Detroit Lions going against the Minnesota Vikings. So for this one, it's pretty interesting, right? Like I think that Dalvin Cook has a phenomenal matchup here. He's in a phenomenal spot at home, favored against the Detroit Lions defense, one of the worst defenses in the league, but he is questionable. He's a game time decision. And that makes it tough, right? Because if Dalvin Cook is playing and he's playing in a not limited capacity, I think this is a smash spot for Dalvin Cook. I don't think he'll be crazily high owned because of those question marks with the injuries coming in at the 4th highest owned right now. But if he does play and he's not limited, he's going to absolutely smash. But with that said, he very well could play, and he could play maybe half the snaps. Maybe half of the snaps go to Madison. So that's my concern. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. And if Dalvin Cook does not play, that makes Madison probably one of the best plays on the slate, right?
Yeah, if he doesn't play, that makes Madison a lock for me. Detroit's allowing the most fantasy points per game to running backs, and Minnesota's favored by 14 at home. That's like running back dream right there. I'm with you. If Cook is active, you're not sitting him in season long leagues, and at the low ownership. I mean, go for it in in DFS, just because that matchup is there. And if I think that the coaching staff is smart enough to recognize that they're playing the Lions, who are 0-4, that if there's anything wrong with him, they'll just sit him outright. So, if he's playing, I'm going to trust that he's healthy enough to get enough carries to really pay off his floor and ceiling. So I will have him in the GPPs.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you got to, right? Like this is
Yeah.
it just seems like the perfect spot for Cook. But yeah, in terms of the passing game for Minnesota, I feel like we could attack that as well. Any interest in Jefferson, Thielen, Osborne?
Yeah, for sure. Detroit is a defense that you can attack with anything. Their secondary is they're on their backups and their third stringers already, and the starters weren't even that good. Um, Jefferson and Thielen. Jefferson has 37 targets. Thielen has 34. Double stacks are fine to go in this. Tyler Conklin is another one. He's caught up to KJ Osborne, who we were all over at the beginning in targets. I think he's a top 12 tight end this week against Detroit, who has given up the ninth most yards and the eighth most fantasy points to tight ends. So just kind of taking a look here. The Vikings have a 29 team total. Like that's upwards of Bills Chiefs range. So I think you can do a lot with their side.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really important game. I mean, it's hard to look at this game and look at the matchup and just not get some pieces of this game for sure. In terms of any run back options on the Detroit side, I mean, anything.
Um, yeah, I mean, I like Swift. His price doesn't seem to move. Problem with him is he comes in at with a perpetual questionable tag this week. Um, I think they're Detroit. Last I saw is expecting to be without their left tackle Penei Sewell, and they're already missing Taylor Decker, and they placed their center on injured reserve this week. So I don't think we talked about the Vikings defense, but as I said that, it made me like them a lot more. Um, but I think that sets up well for Swift with with a kind of a fierce pass rush and little checkdowns to him. He's got the third most targets among running backs, so he'd probably be the only one I'd be interested on the Detroit team, especially with Hawkinson kind of banged up, even though he's expected to play.
Yeah, Hawkinson does stick out a little bit, but I'd rather just punt down, save $3,000 and get Ricky Seals Jones. But yeah, Hawkinson was somebody that started off the year hot, been kind of banged up lately. Still had 8 targets last week, but I think he's another guy that I was somewhat considering in terms of a running back, but don't think I'll get there too much. I think we covered a lot in this game. I think it's a pretty important one for the most part. I'm really liking that Viking side. So let's move on to the next one, which I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this one. We have the Dolphins going against the Buccaneers. What's sticking out to you on this one?
I feel like I don't have enough of it. Like I was looking over my lineups. Buccaneers also have a team total of 29 points in this one. The one that I've been on all week is Leonard Fournette, who is $5,200. Took over as the main running back in one of the premier offenses in the league. Miami's given up over 5 yards per carry and the third most fantasy points per game to running backs. I called him in my articles on Football Diehards the cash lock of the week this week. I backed off that a little bit. I still have him in mind because of his price and because of his expected workload and the matchup. But it looks like Giovanni Bernard is going to return, which I think takes away a little bit of the upside to his passing game role. Not a ton, but enough that I think it at least makes it a question mark. Like if you're going, I got one spot left between him and Damian Williams. Like who do I play? I think that it's a legitimate question now with those two who you play if you are playing one. I currently have both in my cash. But what do you think about Fournette? And then how about the passing game as well, which is always fun with Brady?
Yeah, I was hoping Bernard would be out, to be honest, just to make it a lot easier. I think he's still in play, and I said that yeah, if Bernard was playing, I'd still have interest in Fournette, but if Bernard was out, I'd be all in on Fournette. So that does hurt a little bit, but I still think he is someone in play there. He's cheap, 5,200, but like you mentioned, Damian Williams, 400 more. I like him a little bit more now that Bernard is going to play, right? But yeah, in terms of the passing game, I actually have a lot of interest in the passing game on both sides. So for the Dolphins, they're big underdogs. You do not run on the Buccaneers. Teams do not do it. If they try to do it, they are not successful. Buccaneers have one of the best, if not the best, run defenses in the league. And Will Fuller is on IR. I think it makes a great spot for Waddle here, who is 4,800, very cheap. And it was weird. Last week, he had 3 targets, 3 receptions on the very first drive. And after that, they completely shied away from him. But I think I'm going back to Waddle here. And then also Gesicki as well, 4,200. I think it's a great spot against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, who very good run defense, not so great pass defense. I think they can really exploit them there. I might even get a little crazy with it and do some Brissett stacks. I mean, Brissett's very cheap in his own right, 5,200. He's been looking decent. He's throwing the ball a ton, 30 attempts in week 4, 49 in week 3, 40 in week 2. So, the volume is there. I think the matchup is there. The game script's there. They're going to be passing. It's a solid matchup against the Buccaneers passing defense. So I do actually like that Miami side quite a bit. And then on the flip side, you have, clear run back options. You have Mike Evans, 6,800. Godwin 6,300. Brown is way too cheap at 5,200 as well. So I think I'll be going that route. I think I like a lot of this Miami side, and then running it back with guys like Evans, Godwin, and then Brown as well. In terms of stacking up Brady, I think you could do that as well. I think Brady stacks are always in play. And then, of course, run back options on Miami. So, yeah, I like this game quite a bit. I think there's a lot of great pieces in this game as well, great stackable options. But, yeah, I'm going to have a lot of exposure to this game. I think it's a great spot for some of these Miami pass catchers.
Yeah, and what's funny is what I'm noticing here is I'm looking at our ownerships. It looks like we've got Antonio Brown at 12.5%. Is the highest owned Bucs receiver. Then we've got Godwin around 10% and Mike Evans at around 8%. That's reverse order of their targets this year. So I think you can really, if that holds, you can do some pretty fun things with getting leverage. If Antonio Brown is the highest owned, he's got 21 targets. Godwin has 31. Mike Evans has 37. Like you said, all of them are in play. So I kind of like them in that reverse order for GPP priority if you are going to use one or two of them.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's more of like a pricing thing for sure. We see that Evans
Yep.
6,800, Brown is 5,200. But yeah, agree. You could very well get leverage. I think Evans and Godwin and Brown. I think they're all three in play this week as always. I think we covered everything. Anything else in this game?
No, I think we did pretty well with this one.
All right, so we'll move on to the next game. We have the Packers going against the Bengals. And for me, I'm going to go right back to the well with Davante Adams. I expected him to be a little bit lower owned, but not really. I mean, he's still the highest projected owned player on the slate in terms of wide receiver, 21.37%. The next highest owned is going to be 16% owned. So, he's getting a lot of ownership, and rightfully so. I think it's a great bounce back spot for Adams, who you have to play week in and week out. Always take a look at Davante Adams. He always has that big boom upside. He's still last week 11 targets, 6 receptions, only 64 yards, no touchdowns. I do expect him to bounce back here against Cincinnati. On the Cincinnati side, I think all three of these wide receivers are just way too cheap. You have Chase, who is 5,800. You have Boyd, who is 5,300, and then Higgins, who is 5,000. All three of those are pretty underpriced there. I like Chase quite a bit. I think he is the guy I'll go to the majority of the time, but I don't mind sprinkling in some Boyd and Higgins. Anybody else I didn't touch on? Any thoughts on those guys that I mentioned?
No, I'm pretty much with you. The only thing that's really shifted for me this week is I went from liking the Bengals offense to loving them. They're actually my favorite team to stack in GPP now that we have the news that Jair Alexander is out, possibly for the season, and they're also missing Zadarius, excuse me, Zadarius Smith, who is their probably the second best cover guy. So, or with Cincinnati, with Green Bay being that backed up, and how Cincinnati upped their pace again to kind of the point where we saw them last year, coupled with a questionable running game this week, I think we're going to see a lot of passing out of them. I think you can double, even triple stack, and like you said, bringing it back with Davante Adams just fits perfectly for correlation.
Yep, I don't hate that call whatsoever. Burrow stacks, yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. And then, yeah, a phenomenal run back option, right? Devontae Adams. So, I think we are on the
Yes.
same page there. Any, so you don't have interest in Mixon or Jones, any of them run game?
Yeah, no, the problem with Jones is there are players around him I like a little bit better, but I'm fine. I'm fine playing Aaron Jones. I mean, just the way they kind of involve AJ Dillon and the fact that Rodgers still gets red zone looks as a rushing quarterback. There are players priced around Jones like Eckler that I like a little bit better in this one. I'm not worried about the fact that Dillon banked 16 touches last week. That was in a blowout of the Steelers, and that most of that came in the fourth quarter. So Jones is still the guy there. He's the RB3 in PPR format. So he's got floor and ceiling in this. I'd just rather, if I'm doing Bengals stacks, I feel like Adams has got a higher floor and ceiling. So with a couple $100 difference, I don't feel the need to go to Jones there.
Yeah, looks like we line up there. Yeah, it's weird. Like these Bengals wide receivers are also cheap, but they're also low owned as well. T. Higgins projected to come in around 6% ownership. Same with Chase. So Higgins and Chase 6%, and then Boyd 5%. So yeah, very low owned there for these Bengals wide receivers. Not sure why, to be honest.
No, I don't really know either. Honestly, I mean, people got to see that Green Bay's banged up too, and what the Bengals did last week. Burrow had highs in attempts and yards.
Yeah, I mean, once Burrow started throwing the ball, they started looking good. Maybe they'll take a look at that and maybe implement it into this game, and I think it'd be good for them for sure. So let's move on to the next game. We have Pittsburgh going against Denver, and yeah, not much sticks out to me in this game, to be honest. I mean, the Broncos defense, but you know me, I typically like paying down for defense. I'll be down in the Washington area this week. I think Broncos defense is fine if you can go up there and pay for them. On the Pittsburgh side, I actually have some interest in Harris. I mean, how can you not, right? It's a bad matchup. Broncos defense is very good, but Harris is getting unreal, usage in the passing game. 11 6 targets in week 4. He had that 19 target game in week 3, right? So he's getting a ton of targets. Maybe not the most effective or productive guy in terms of the running game, but he's going to be using the passing game. And I feel like we talked about this Wednesday, where I feel like Ben is going to continue to throw the ball a ton. He's thrown the ball a ton of times each game, 40 times in week 4, 58 times in week 3, 40 in week 2. He is throwing the ball nonstop. He may not be the best quarterback. He may be, washed and looking terrible, but he is still throwing the ball a ton. I think Harris does benefit from that. And then also Deontay Johnson. So I actually have a ton of interest in Johnson this week. Trying to find his ownership here, and I don't really see it. But yeah, Johnson is somebody that I have interest in. When he does play, Johnson does do great things. 13 targets in week 4, 12 in week 2, 10 in week 1, averaging 20.4 DraftKings points. He's going to get the ball. Like we talked about, the Steelers are going to throw the ball. So I think Johnson is somebody that really does have my interest, and I do see his ownership. It is down all the way at 3%. So yeah, kind of a tough game to be excited about, right? I think it's one of the lowest totals, if not the lowest total on the slate. But I think some of these Pittsburgh options are going to be very low owned, and I think they could have some upside here in a very ugly game.
Yeah, I was looking at that ownership of Deontay too, who I like. I mean, he's bankable for double-digit targets a week, and when you're getting him lower than KJ Osborne and AJ Green and Randall Cobb and Robbie Anderson, who has done nothing yet this year, I really like that as a GPP. I have to stamp my take that I did. I was on the Football Diehards with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey last night on Sirius, and I stamped my total fade of Najee Harris there. So I'm going to have to do it on this show too. um, it's based on a couple of things. It's his ownership is high. He's coming in at the 7th highest owned there, and I think there's more downside to upside with him this week. So we talked, I think, on the Wednesday show about his target share and how that kind of saves, whatever inefficiencies running the ball or lack of carries if Pittsburgh is throwing a lot in any given week. Denver's allowed the lowest yards per carry and the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. That's kind of common knowledge, but they've also given up the fewest receiving yards and the fewest catches out of the backfield. So I just don't see any outs for him to achieve that ceiling in such a low scoring defensive minded game. So I mean, when you're talking about his price tag at 6,900 with Ezekiel Elliott $1,000 $100 more, Saquon Barkley 400 more, James Robinson 900 less. I'm just looking at ownerships that are around his. I'd prefer those guys over Najee. So I've kind of banked myself on a full fade of him, and with Deontay Johnson as the leverage play off him, and if any Pittsburgh exposure, and we'll see. We'll check in on Wednesday and see how that worked out.
No, I agree. I mean, I like Elliott more, and Elliott and Barkley, I like them both more, and I like them a lot more actually. And they're going to be, lower owned projected as well. So with you there, but I will have. I'm not going to full out fade Harris because of the crazy pass catching upside, but can't expect him to like absolutely go off. Right? It's a tough matchup. don't hate that the fade, especially looking at the ownership. But yeah, I'm more interested in the Johnson side for sure, especially seeing he's 3% ownership. So yeah, I do like Johnson quite a bit. Yeah, not much else sticks out in this game. Any interest in the running game at all?
Um, no, no, I don't have anybody on Denver in this one. Cortland Sutton with their secondary is the only one that I would have been looking at, but he's banged up. He's not even certain to play, so you can find better plays from other
Yeah,
games.
not
Just
the
a quick
best.
update on our game here. Kyle Pitts continues to light up the Jets. He's up to 5 catches, 58 yards, and a score. Hayden Hurst has a score in this game, so the Jets can't seem to stop the tight ends for the Falcons. Zach Wilson has mustered a total of 11 passing yards with an interception early in the second quarter, so it's not looking good for the New York side of things right now. It looks like Ty Johnson has that one catch. So all of you who started Corey Davis, hopefully don't panic if they're in garbage time.
Yeah, it looks like everything's going according to how we expected, or at least how I expected. Nice to see Pitts finally show up, right? Been waiting for him to show up, and now he has, so that's good. All right, so let's move on to the next game, and we have the Eagles going against the Panthers. What's sticking out to you on this one here?
Well, this is a weird one, honestly. It seems like the total should be higher than it is. I know that both defenses have their ways of stopping certain plays, but both these offenses are moving, and their pace is above the league average. Sam Darnold is the QB5 overall through 4 weeks, which is incredible. He leads the league in rushing touchdowns among quarterbacks. The Eagles have given up 9 passing touchdowns on only 1 interception. So, I mean, you know, there's really not much risk, I don't think, to Darnold in this game. There would be better if McCaffrey was playing, and it looks like he's not going to, which is probably the smart thing. They can bring him back next week. So I think you can play Darnold for sure. I think you can play Chuba Hubbard for sure. He had 15 touches. Rodney Smith had 5, and Royce Freeman had 3 last week when in their loss to Dallas. One thing to point out, though, is we compared Chuba to Mike Davis last year and saying well, they're not McCaffrey, but this is so tailback friendly that you can kind of make him 80 to 85% McCaffrey. Chuba was not used in passing downs, so that is interesting to me. I think it lowers his floor a pretty good deal, especially where the Eagles are more of a pass funnel defense. You still can certainly use him, but I do think there's a little bit more added risk if they're going to continue to run out Rodney Smith in the passing situations instead of Hubbard. And so where are you on that? And then what about is it DJ Moore time again?
It's always DJ Moore time, right?
Apparently.
Hubbard. Hubbard, I don't know if I'll get there. I mean, there's guys that I like that are more expensive than I'm, like an Elliott, like a Barkley we'll talk about, that I'm all over this week, like a Derrick Henry who's going to be in pretty much every single one of my lineups. And then there's guys that I like that are cheaper than Hubbard as well. You mentioned the lack of pass catching upside that we're not going to get like we got from a Mike Davis last year. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see myself getting too much Hubbard. I think it could be a spot where he could bounce back. I mean, Sam Darnold did vulture a touchdown from him last week. Sam Darnold actually had 2 rushing touchdowns last week, which was very upsetting. But for me, I'm kind of more interested in the Darnold side here. Darnold has, surprisingly been looking very good this year, averaging 26.9 DraftKings points. He's 6,600. I don't mind the matchup. DJ Moore. I love DJ Moore here. Once again, he went off last week in a matchup that was not the best matchup in the world. He still had 34.9 DraftKings points going against Philly. A little bit better matchup here. 7,500. They did bump up his price at 900, which makes sense to me. I mean, no McCaffrey this week, which I think helps Moore a ton. If McCaffrey was playing, I probably wouldn't be playing Moore. But since McCaffrey is out, I'm going right back to the well here with Moore once again. He's having a phenomenal year. Even when McCaffrey was playing, it's not like he was doing bad. I mean, he's still doing really good. But with McCaffrey out, he has been putting up some phenomenal numbers. So I'm going right back to the well with DJ Moore there at 7,500. And then on the Philly side, I think Hurts is in play every single week. Not going to him in cash, but you know he's fine. And then also Devonta Smith had 10 targets last week. He is 5,900. I don't hate him as a run back option. Anybody else that sticks out to you, or any thoughts on more yourself, and also anything on the Eagles side?
No, I think you got everything right. I'll just mention that with the Eagles running backs, it's looking like that they are completely game script dependent. If the Eagles are out in front, then Miles Sanders, I think, will get his. But this looks like a negative game script for them with the Panthers as 5-point favorites right now. The Eagles not being a competitive football team against some of these teams is destroying Miles Sanders' fantasy. So Panthers have given up the fifth fewest fantasy points per game to running backs, and their home favorites. I'm totally out on Sanders, but I do think Gainwell is in play as that PPR James White role. If you want to get a little bit cute in this game, if you're mixed multi entering or mass multi entering, I should say. Excuse me.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, not too interested in the Eagles run game, but if I had to pick somebody, it probably would be that Gainwell play there. 4,900, but again, not too much interest there. We do see, though, that DJ Moore is projected to be the fourth highest owned wide receiver on the slate. And yeah, you definitely can see why he's been on fire. And with, especially with no McCaffrey, I think that does help DJ Moore here in this matchup. He is the man for the Panthers right now. All right, so we'll move on to the next game. Then we have the Titans going against the Jaguars. And yeah, a very interesting game for me. I have a lot of interest, in this game. Derrick Henry, for one. I mean, how can we not talk about him? He's 9,000. He's projected to be the highest owned running back on the slate, and by a very decent margin as well. I think I saw he's projected to be coming in around 27% owned. I was all over him last week, had him in about every lineup. It definitely paid off. He did fine. Didn't completely blow up. What do you have, like 28.7 DraftKings points? Not terrible. Had 33 carries, 2 targets, 2 receptions as well. I don't know what it is, but it seems like whenever Derrick Henry plays the Jaguars, he just completely goes off. He is averaging 28.1 DraftKings points on the year. It's a phenomenal matchup against Jacksonville here. Can't really ask for a better matchup. They're favored, which I do like in terms of Derrick Henry. I always like playing him when he is favored because of the lack of pass catching ability. But with that said, this year that completely has changed around. We talked about how Derrick Henry actually has more receptions than Alvin Kamara through 4 weeks, and that's just crazy to say out loud. But here we are, and they're using him in the passing game, and they're using him quite a bit. So, I like Derrick Henry. I don't think you can get away from him this week. I mean, high owned or not, it's hard to fade Henry. I'd be terrified fading Henry. So, are you as high on Henry as me? And it looks like a lot of other people, or are you going to be a little bit off him this week because of the ownership?
No, I mean he's averaging over 30 touches a game. There's no player in the NFL that is more bankable right now. Like you said, this is a great matchup and great game script. Jaguars have given up the 7th most fantasy points per game to running backs. AJ Brown is back, but Julio Jones is still out. So I mean, you can bank on him for at least 25 touches in this one, even if they go a little bit more pass happy against a bad pass defense as well. But I do think on FanDuel, if you're playing on FanDuel, it's a little bit more of a question, which is weird because his scoring is suited better for FanDuel being half PPR, but he's 10,400. And there are some cheap running backs over there that you can build around and get stud receivers and a stud tight end in as well with Waller. So, I mean, I do think it's at least a question over there. But if you're playing DraftKings, Henry should be the first person you click into your cash game.
Yep, I like Henry quite a bit, but yeah, he is coming in very high owned, but rightfully so. I guess something else that stuck out for me in terms of the Tennessee side. So Julio Jones is going to be out. AJ Brown's interesting, 6,500 on the Jacksonville side. I do like quite a few options. So Chark is going to be out. He is on the IR. I think that opens up a lot of things for both Marvin Jones Jr. and Chenault. And we do see that Chenault is coming in as one, two, three, four, the 5th highest owned wide receiver at 12%, whereas Marvin Jones Jr. is coming in at 4% owned. I think both are in play, but I kind of really like Marvin Jones Jr., especially seeing that ownership. He is more expensive than Chenault, but even with Chark playing, Marvin Jones Jr. has had a pretty solid year. I mean, he had an off week last week, but look at the first 3 weeks: 9 targets in week 1, 11 in week 2, 8 in week 3. Averaging 13.5 DraftKings points. I really like Marvin Jones Jr. this week at that price tag, 5,700. But Chenault's definitely in play as well. I like both those guys. Any preference for you between Jones, Chenault, and then any thoughts on the AJ Brown?
I agree completely, especially on the Jacksonville receivers. With Chark out, Tennessee has given up the second most points per game to wide receivers. They don't have a pass rush. I think you can aggressively double stack this side. The Jaguars have a team total of 22, which is not good, but it's also their highest one that they've had to date. So, yeah, I mean, the over-under on this game looks like it's coming in at 48.5, which is, I think you can go over on this one. If you're betting, it's still not legal here in Maine. I don't know about you, but I can't, which I would like to do. But yeah, I mean, Lawrence, Marvin Jones, Chenault. I do agree with you that if you are picking one, absolutely would take Jones at the lesser ownership. Like you said, he's more expensive, but not that much, and it's not a prohibitive price tag at 5,700. So yeah, Marvin Jones has, I think, GPP winning upside in this one.
Yeah, 100%. I'm all over Marvin Jones Jr. this week, but yeah, Chenault's in play for me as well. Anything else in this game? I think we covered everything for the most part. Any interest in it? It's hard to get there on anybody outside of AJ Brown in terms of wide receivers. Just kind of like a toss up from there on out. Like Akine, you have Roger. I just don't really have much interest in those guys. Reynolds. Anybody else stick out to you?
No, their pass catching options outside of the top two guys are kind of pitiful.
Yeah.
um,
Oh yeah.
anything. If as long as AJ Brown is healthy, I mean, it's a hamstring, which is tricky with him. So I don't think I would get there in cash, but he's too cheap on both sites. I'm overweight in GPP. Just because of the targets and the average depth of target he should see in this game in a really good matchup. The Jaguars have allowed the fourth most fantasy points per game to wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean he's so cheap, right? 6,500 hamstring injury, but yeah, he's coming in at about 9% ownership right now. Great matchup for Brown there, but yeah, I'm going to be on the Henry train, and then also really liking those Jacksonville wide receivers. So I think we covered most everything for this game. Let's move on to the next one. We have the Raiders going against the Bears. Yeah, not much sticking out to me on this game outside of there's a clear one that sticks out that'll let you point out. But anything sticking out to you?
I assume you're talking about Damian Williams. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah, Damian Williams is going to be one of the higher owned plays on this slate. I'm just looking for the running backs that I got right here. Yep, he's coming in third highest owned running back on our on our list, right behind Leonard Fournette, who we spoke about earlier. Um, Williams is a rock solid cash play this week. He should have an every down role in this one. Don't know how they're going to use Khalil Herbert in this, but he's a sixth round rookie. Um, Damian Williams is an excellent pass catcher. He's a good route runner and he's a good blocker. So against this Raiders squad, the only thing that bugs me a little bit is that they are 5 point underdogs to the Raiders.
Yep.
But with Bill Lazor calling plays now for Detroit, their pace should be better. We saw the difference on the field against Detroit last week with him calling the plays. So I really like Damian Williams, and I'll just say again, going back to FanDuel, he's mispriced there. The DraftKings tried to do a pretty good job of making it at least a question at 5,600, but he's 5,800 on FanDuel, so he pretty much should be in 100% of your lineups there.
Yep, 100% agree. I do like Williams myself. He will be in my cash lineup as well, which I have not built yet. Usually I do get that done, but there's just so much injury news that I'm still waiting for as well. But it looks like we have figured out most of it. Yeah, Williams for me on Chicago. Outside of that, just nothing really sticks out. I don't want to pay up for Waller, 7,300. I don't really have interest in these Raiders wide receivers. Don't have interest in these Bears wide receivers. Just pretty much Williams, and that's about it. I guess the Raiders defense kind of does stick out because the Bears are missing Montgomery. The Bears are starting Fields. I think the Raiders defense at 2,900 kind of sticks out, but yeah, I think it's Williams for me, and that's about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the this Allen Robinson thing is just sad at this point. You can't play him right now. And even with the offensive coordinator calling these plays and opening up the field, it still doesn't help Robinson because Fields is a downfield passer. I don't know if we're going to get Robinson's fantasy stock to where we think it's going to be. Um, so I think you can play Mooney in deep GPPs, but I have no interest in Robinson, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's crazy, right? Because he's 5,500. Like
Yeah,
that's insane, but it's so hard to get to him.
yeah.
All right.
It's too bad.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I agree. But yeah, that price tag is getting low. We'll see how low it does get throughout the season. So we'll move on to the next game. We have the Browns going against the Chargers. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this game. Anything sticking out to you?
Well, some things changed with this during the week, and I just got to find my notes here. The Browns are banged up, so I was kind of not doing much with this game. But the Browns have a ton of offensive line injuries. Jedrick Wills, I haven't seen. I don't think we have inactives yet, but they lost their center. Well, they lost their guard Chris Hubbard to IR. Their center J.C. Treader didn't practice all week, and their left tackle Jedrick Wills looks unlikely to play too after not practicing all week. So that pretty much takes the Browns' offense out for me. Chubb was the only one I was really interested anyway against this Chargers team that has absolutely shut down wide receivers so far this year, and now I'm not interested in him either. I like the Chargers defense with Joey Bosa and the pass rush on the other side as a GPP play in this. I think there's a good amount of upside to them if they can get the pass rush on Mayfield all day against what looks like it's going to be three backup offensive linemen.
Yeah, good point there. Let's see. Yeah, the Chargers defense is cheap, right? 2,700. Don't hate that. Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. I mean, I don't have any interest in any of these Browns. It's always tough trying to, Chubb. I love Chubb. He's great, but we see Kareem Hunt is doing a lot of great things as well. So it's hard to kind of pick between one or the other. And you mentioned the offensive line's definitely beat up. That does hurt a ton. No interest in Odell Beckham Jr. Yeah, I think the defense. I think that's a great call there. 2,700. On the Charger side, like to be honest, I don't have much interest in this game as a whole, but if anything, I don't hate Eckler. I think Eckler is always in play. The Browns defense is very good, but Eckler's still going to get a ton of targets, a ton of receptions. I think he's in play for sure. But Keenan Allen is somebody that's always very reliable. Maybe not the most upside, maybe not the highest ceiling in the world, but he's 6,500. You can always count on him to get 10, 11, maybe 12 targets, 8, 9, 10 receptions on any given week, and he's 6,500. I'd rather play him than go up and get Mike Williams, who is 7,200, who maybe has a little bit more upside, but I think Keenan Allen's the safer out of the two. So, yeah, not much interest in this game. I mean, if anything, maybe Keenan Allen 6,500, sprinkle some Eckler, but yeah, don't love it to be honest. Anything sticking out to you in terms of the Charger side?
Yeah, I mean, at 11 targets per game, Keenan Allen is like the perfect cash play and the perfect GPP fade with a low average depth of target. Um, I'm probably a little bit more interested in Eckler than we've kind of let on. I mean, he's the RB2 in PPR scoring right now, so the whatever they got behind him with Justin Jackson and Larry Roundtree is not doing anything to take away his stock. Um, like you said, the game itself is just not the most exciting that we have on the slate. But I think you're fine with those two guys. I do agree with you that Williams is a little bit too expensive for me to kind of find the upside this week in this game. But yeah, I like Allen and Eckler a good bit.
Yeah, I see that Allen is coming in at about 11% ownership, which kind of I don't like that to be honest. That's up there for sure. And then Eckler though he's 9% ownership right now. So, yep, I think both those guys are in play though. Like you mentioned though, and in terms of GPP, I don't know if I get to Allen. Just limited upside there, right? I think cash games. I think he's fine. But in terms of tournaments, especially seeing the 11% ownership that he's gaining, I don't know if I'll get there that much. But yeah, so we have 2 games left, and can't wait to hear your thoughts on these last 2 because we have 2 pretty good ones, and I have a lot of interest in both of these. So we have the 49ers going against the Cardinals. What's sticking out to you on this one here?
So before we get to that, we've had some breaking news that just came out. Going back to a game that we spoke about before, Devontae Parker has been ruled out for this game
Boom.
against Tampa. So I mean, you already spoke your love about Jalen Waddle. We talked about Mike Gesicki. I think this is a significant boost to both of those guys, and I think you have to consider them both as cash plays now. Not together, but I think one of them can be considered as a cash play in this, just with the condensed offense and the expected target share coming their way. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, that's huge, right? It was already pretty big with Fuller being out, but
Yeah,
now that Parker's out, that's a game changer.
yeah, it really could be with them, but the game script and them throwing as much as they're going to have to throw. I'm going to have to relook at things now.
Yep, that's pretty. I was already high on him now, but now I like him
Yeah,
even more.
yeah, yeah. All right, so back to the task at hand. So San Francisco to Arizona. So the big one here, and I'm wondering what you're going to do with this. Um, all week, my quarterback in cash on DraftKings has been either Daniel Jones or Trey Lance all week. The 2 games that we are going to talk about now. Um, right now, it's Daniel Jones. And the tipping point for me was that George Kittle was ruled out of this game, which I think hurts Lance enough for me to push him down below him. But we're talking about a guy that scored over 20 DraftKings points in 2 quarters last week. The Cardinals have allowed the 7th most rushing yards to quarterbacks, so we could see Trey Lance's upside really get unlocked in this one in a pace-up game. This has a game total over 50, even with Kittle out. Debo Samuel could go ballistic in this one, and I cannot believe how wrong I was on that guy preseason. I don't know if I missed on a player as badly as I did with him. Um, but what do you think? Are you using Lance this year? And then what about Ayuk too? Do we get a breakout?
I don't know about Ayuk anymore. I mean, I was so high. I was like you. I was so high on Ayuk and so low on Debo Samuel this year, and it's like the other way around, right? Like it looks like Debo Samuel is the guy. So far through 4 weeks, Debo Samuel actually has more targets than both Ayuk and Kittle combined, which is just crazy to think about. So I think Samuel is the man, but yeah, with Kittle out, maybe it could be a breakout game for Ayuk, who 2 weeks ago he kind of popped off a little bit, but last week he went back down to 3 targets, 1 reception. So it's just hard to. Seems like a boom or bust type of play with Ayuk 4,500. I don't think he'll be highly owned really at all. Maybe worth some sprinkles if you're playing multiple lineups. I just can't get there personally. I'm more on the Samuel side. I think he is that guy. In terms of Trey Lance, I think I probably will get there in terms of cash. I like the matchup. I believe they're projected to be trailing. I think they're underdogs, 5,700 rushing yard upside. I'm going against Arizona. I like it quite a bit. Clear stacking option and Debo Samuel as well. With Kittle out, I do agree that that does hurt him. I think Ross Dwelly, I think that makes him an interesting play to at least consider. 2,700, now going to be the number 1 tight end on the team, and they don't have much passing options to go to in general, right? You have Samuel, you have Dwelly, and then you have Ayuk, and then most of those are probably going to go to Samuel. So, yeah, I like Lance. I like Samuel. I like Lance and Samuel stacks this week, and then clear run back options. Hopkins, Green, Kirk, Moore, they all are doing good this year. I mean, they're all doing good. Any preference on a run back option? I mean, Hopkins it seems pretty cheap, 7,600 this week, but he has been kind of inconsistent so far this year.
Yeah, it would be him for me if I was picking one. But I mean, I wrote about this in the GPP article for Football Diehards. It's a weird one because if you go down their target list, Hopkins has 26, AJ Green has 24, Chase Edmonds 22, Kirk 18, Rondell Moore 18, Max Williams 16. He's really spreading the ball around there, which is good for their team, but bad for fantasy. Um, I do think if you're stacking 49ers and you want to run it back with one, you go with the most reliable. I think there's possible squeaky wheel stuff here. like we saw with Robert Woods. I mean, they're 4-0, so I don't know if anyone on the Cardinals are complaining about the way their season's been going right now. But yeah, Hopkins would be the run back. I think he's the most consistent. Edmonds would be my second option there, but he's also banged up. So we'll see how that turns out. And then on the flip side, I wrote about this too. I do think I liked it better when Kittle was in doing this stuff, but I do think there's a way if you want to stack this game to just use Kyler Murray and use no wide receivers, and then bring it back with the San Francisco passing option. Because if he spreads it around as much as he is, you're not getting an optimal lineup from one of those receivers, and it's definitely going to be the quarterback plus his rushing upside. I kind of like the idea of running him, naked, as they say, with like a Debo Ayuk or something like that in those deep GPPs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Kyler Murray does stick out to me. Yeah, if I was to go up and pay for a quarterback in cash, it would be him. I like him a lot. I talk about him every week, averaging nearly 30 DraftKings points, has that rushing yard upside as well. Spreading the ball around, which, like you said, is good for the team, bad for fantasy, makes it really hard to, see who's going to do what. I mean, it's pretty close, but I'd probably with you. I'd go with Hopkins, 7,600, but I don't feel completely great about it. But yeah. Yep, I think we covered pretty much everything here. We do have one more game to talk about. It's going to be the Giants and the Cowboys. So I'll let you start this one off.
Yeah, I mean, this is the top game really for fantasy, I think, this week, just because when you're stacking games, a lot of times it gets a little tricky because you got such clear ways the stacks go. Like the Chiefs, for instance, everybody that stacks the Chiefs is going Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, and for good reason. And, it's hard to get cute with a team like that when it's so condensed. The Packers is the same way. You don't make Packers stacks without Devontae Adams, but you can do this game a bunch of different ways. I have Daniel Jones as my cash QB. He's currently the QB6 in fantasy, which is music to my ears. One of only two QBs with a passer rating of 90 or better over the last 5 games. Kyler Murray being the other. He's third in the league in rushing yards among quarterbacks, leading the league in deep ball accuracy over 20 yards. Dallas has allowed the second most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton are out, so we should see Galladay and Kadarius Toney leading in targets here. I think John Ross is a great GPP target with his deep ball upside. Evan Engram is, I think, looking like the next highest owned. Let me just check so after Darren Waller, Engram is coming in at the second highest owned tight end at 3,200. I'm not comfortable with that. He did get 6 targets last week. He is an athletic tight end, kind of like the Kyle Pitts mold, where you can line him up at receiver or whatever. Our offensive coordinator doesn't know how to use him, which is a problem. He's averaged under 40 yards per game since Garrett took over as offensive coordinator. He's only scored twice over that span. With his price tag, I think he's still in play, that you can play him in giant stacks. I am going against the ownership, though, and not playing him in cash. There's cheap tight ends that I like better than him. We already spoke about Ricky Seals-Jones. We spoke about Dwelly. I like him better than Engram. Cameron Brate is $100 more. I'd stick to those guys before I'd use Engram in cash. Anything I missed for you on the Giants? I mean, I didn't talk about Barkley much, but how about that? And where are you on the Cowboys side?
Yeah, so this is going to be my highest exposed game. I believe it is the highest total on the slate as well, right? So, yeah, I'm with you
Yeah.
on the Jones call. I do like him. He's been looking phenomenal this year. I like the matchup against Dallas. I like the game as well as a whole. Yeah, don't mind stacking him up. You have Galladay, and then you have Toney as well. Toney's very cheap, 4K. He did really well last week. I'll be going back to him. Ingram, I'm like you. I think he is in play, but there are guys I like that are cheaper. I'd rather play Gesicki, a little bit more expensive, than I'd rather go down and save 700 with Ricky Seals-Jones. So I think he's in play, 6 targets both weeks he's played this year. But yeah, I like other options there. So yeah, I think you covered everything pretty good on the Giants side. I'll have some stacks for sure. Barkley, yeah, Barkley for sure. So Barkley and Elliott, I like both these guys a ton. I'm going to have a lot of both of them. I guess Elliott on the Dallas side, I guess the injury does kind of concern me a little bit. Looks like he is expected to play, but both these guys are getting usage. Elliott has been running the ball, 20 attempts in week 4, 17 in week 3. Getting a little bit of work in the passing game as well. Three receptions a couple weeks ago, right? So I think Elliott and Barkley are both in play, and you take a look at Dak and this Cowboys offense, and it's kind of frustrating because week 1 he throws the ball 58 times, but week 2, 3, and 4 he has not reached 30 passing attempts. 27 in week 2, 26 in week 3, and only 22 in week 4, and he's getting touchdowns. He scored 4 touchdowns last week. Very efficient, but those, the lack of passing definitely does concern me. I believe, I'm not sure, you probably know this, are they favored in this game, Dallas?
Yep, I'm just taking a look right now. I think they're favored by 3 or 4, which is, I could be wrong. It might be more than that. They're definitely favored. Let me just look quick. Yeah, we've got Dallas is favored. Oh, but they're favored by 5.5.
Five and
So
a half.
yeah, yep.
Yes. Yeah, see that concerns me, right? In terms of,
Mhm.
Dak Prescott, in terms of the Cowboys wide receivers, because they're going to run the ball, it looks like, this year, and it's working out for them, right? So yeah, but
Right.
with that said, right, like take a look at these prices for these Cowboys wide receivers. CD Lamb 6,200, Amari Cooper 6,100. Like those are way too cheap. And yeah, we do see Lamb coming in at the second highest owned. Any thoughts on those crazy price tags?
It's. I wish they were more expensive, honestly. Like I,
Yeah.
I have CeeDee Lamb in my current cash lineup, and I don't want him there because of all the stuff you talked about. I easily choose him over Amari Cooper because Cooper is battling his own hamstring injuries, and he lines up wide more than CeeDee Lamb. So Cooper is a lot more likely to get the James Bradbury coverage for the Giants. And Adoree Jackson on the other side has not been that good this year in coverage grades. So if I'm playing one of those two in cash, I'm playing Lamb more than Cooper. But I mean, it's like you said, they've dialed back the passing so much this year, and the fact that they're winning because of it, I don't just all of a sudden see them opening up the offense again, especially since the Giants' pass defense is better than their run defense. So, that's going to be one that I'm kind of back and forth on down to the end. I'm actually going to kind of see, when we spoke about Waddle earlier, just seeing what replacing CeeDee Lamb with Waddle does for the rest of my team, if it gets me somebody else that I couldn't ordinarily have, and just kind of mess around with that. But I do have Lamb in right now.
Yeah, I think Lamb's fine, but again, yeah, like the lack of passing attempts is very concerning. I'd like to play Dak and this Cowboys offense very heavily in terms of the passing game if they're projected to be trailing, but they are projected to be 5-point favorites, so I don't love that. But yeah, I like both guys in terms of the running game. I think Barkley is a phenomenal option. Zeke as well is a phenomenal option. But yeah, this game as a whole is a game I'm going to be heavily exposed to. So I think we touched on about everything. Like anything else that we missed in this game?
No, I think. Well, we didn't really mention the tight ends too much. I'm looking. We got some popularity with Dalton Schultz after the last couple. He looks like he's the sixth highest owned tight end at 4,400. I will say, no question that I prefer Mike Gesicki in that range at $200 less. Even though the Giants have allowed a touchdown to a tight end every week so far this year. The issue I have with the Dallas tight ends is, while Schultz has put up the numbers the last 2 weeks, he's not the tight end one. He and Jarwin have run the exact same amount of routes. Um, Actually, Dalton Schultz in pass routes run is 20th among NFL tight ends, and Jarwin is 22nd. So I am not going to go with the chalk Schultz in this game, even with the good matchup, just because I'm uncomfortable with the amount of usage in this one with him. I prefer the wide receivers and I prefer the running backs.
Yep. I mean, I don't disagree there. Yeah, it's crazy. I think Dak threw the ball 22 times last week, and Schultz had 8 of those targets. That's insane. But yeah, not much
Yeah,
interest in Schultz myself. Do like other guys below him, like Kaseki, and then also
yeah,
Seals Jones. Probably where I'm going to be this week.
yep. So just as an update, I think before we sign off, 'cause I think that was the last game, right? So we're at
Yep.
halftime in the Falcons Jets game. The Falcons are up 20-3 on the Jets. Pitts is leading the way, 6 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. We got Cordero Patterson, 42 yards on the ground, 3 catches for 34 yards. Matt Ryan, a hyper efficient 189 yards and 2 scores. The Jets
Nice.
are an absolute mess, and it looks like Corey Davis is hurt and is
Oh,
highly
good.
questionable to return, and he's been replaced by Denzel Mims. So there is no joy in Jetville, and I know a lot of people started Corey Davis this week, so hopefully it's not too serious, but he's limping around holding his hamstring, which is not usually a good thing.
Yeah, weird. That's not good. That's not good. But yeah, I'll have to tune into the game after we get off here. But yeah, that's about it, guys. Went through all the games. I think we touched on a lot of great plays. I'd keep an eye out for Dalvin Cook. Is questionable. If Dalvin Cook does play, I think he's fine to sprinkle in. If he does not play, that makes Madison probably the best play on the entire slate. So look out for that. Any final thoughts? Anything else you'd like to add, Jamie?
Nope, just what you said. Watch those inactives. There's a lot of things to look for. Besides Dalvin Cook, Mixon. How the Bengals are going to handle their stuff. What was the other one? We need the 49ers running backs. It looks like Elijah Mitchell's going to play, but if he for some reason doesn't, Trey Sermon is right back in play. The Denver White Cortland Sutton is rolled his ankle in Friday's practice. You got to look at him as well. Just kind of going down off the top of my head. Anything else that stands out? I think those are the main ones. Oh, Chase Edmonds is expected to play, but he is on the questionable list as well. So just keep an eye out for those things as the games go along, especially the late ones.
Yep, for sure. Sounds good. All right, so we will be back on Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, then back next week. Same time, 10 o'clock in the morning, as always, talking some ownership, going game by game, talking stacks, all that good stuff. All right, good luck, everybody. Good luck, Jamie, and we'll talk to you guys next week for week 6. See you.